We do have a quorum, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 council people, 6 council people. Brian, hello. So with that, if we could have our first presentation on the Welcome Center.
That's yours. I have it.
Thank you, Council President and Council. I have a brief presentation for you today to kind of go over all of the decisions that you have made to date on the Welcome Center remodel, where we are at with the project, and hopefully get some general direction from you so that we can get this project wrapped up and under construction. Hang on one second. There we go. So the subject in summary is the proposed Welcome Center floor plan and public restroom configuration, along with the Welcome Center exterior remodel options. The relationship to your council goals is maintain and operate, expand our infrastructure to meet the community needs under Welcome Center improvements, and develop the parking and restroom management plan. So taking your direction, we went back to the architects and we were able to configure the exterior facing restrooms to get that third restroom facing the exterior. And it is shown here on the top of this schematic and in your packet in this section here. We also included a single interior ADA toilet and as well as reconfigured the offices to facilitate the personnel. I think it's the business advocate or the downtown economic development position, along with recreation, will now be able to work in here while still leaving a tremendous amount of space to facilitate welcoming visitors to Grants Pass, which is the purpose of the building. So moving to the Facade Concepts, as you recall, these were created quite a few years ago by Assistant City Manager Dave Reeves and the facilities group. And it was real important to remember that these are really concepts as we've come up with final drawings that would be incorporated into the drawings. Those would come back to you just for final approval. Items like signage, landscaping, and other details will be determined during the final design and bidding phases. These were presented to you in August 21, and we received general direction at that time to wait until the floor plans were finalized before we worked on the exterior facade. The HBSC did show a preference for alternative number 4, but at that time, as we presented to you, they also requested that council look at an option that also might potentially renew it to its original look, should the council be interested in that. This is number 4, which is the one that the HBSC did indicate a preference for, and the original look of the building. And those are in your packet as well, blown up to full size so that you can see those. And I'm just going to kind of walk through these. I'm not going to stop to describe them. But if council has preference for one alternative over another, staff would appreciate direction on that. So the current proposed scope of work from CDA Architects includes 3 ADA exterior restrooms, 1 interior staff restroom, the exterior facade improvements, interior floor plan revisions to house the additional staff, and provisions of drawings and bid specifications to support bidding, award, and construction of all of those improvements. Project LB 6314 currently has a balance of $601,000. It is estimated that to complete these upgrades, we're going to be about $250,000. In addition, I do want to clarify that there's probably an additional $70,000 in both the facade and some HVAC modifications that are going to have to be made. So that's going to be closer to about $320,000. I just want to clarify that. The interior upgrade is the $250,000 alone. The facade would be an additional $70,000 or so. 6314 also, though, is being used to purchase and install the 2 single occupancy stainless steel restrooms downtown. Those restrooms have arrived. They purchased and have arrived, and we have begun preliminary engineering to look at feasibility of the locations that council indicated preference for. We will come back to you with a report of what it would cost and what it would be to install those at those locations and get final direction on placement. It is estimated that each install would be about $50,000 each, or $100,000 to install both of those. So there is plenty of money for both of these in that existing project, and that is funded with a combination of general fund and urban renewal dollars and downtown dollars. And then I have a very, very, very long list of options for you, which are at the back of your packet. But essentially what we're looking for is, if you like alternative 4, and the direction would be just to give us direction and we'll go get started on getting the design documents created, get that out for bid, and come back to you for a potential award in a couple of months. And with that, I would take any of your questions.
Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Jason. On the exterior facade options, not necessarily a question about the particular options, but how long ago, who made those and how long ago were those made?
Boy, I don't know the actual firm that Dave Reeves worked with. Do you?
You were asking who made the decision, or who?
Well, who drew them up? Was it?
Oh, it was an architect. I don't know the name of the architect. It was quite a while ago. As Jason mentioned, those 7 were brought to HBSC because this is in the historic district, for them to provide input. Council wanted their input at the time, and out of those they chose number 4, and then that was brought to council for consideration. But there wasn't anything solidified on the actual outside look of the facade.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that recommendation was made last year, Brian, I think around in the fall.
Yeah.
If I remember right, it was September or October, and they had unanimous consent on what they wanted to see, which kind of surprised me. But they had some strong feelings about it.
Me?
Go ahead, Valerie.
I just have a question on the interior, and I thank you so much, because I think it looks wonderful with the 3. I just have a question on the drawing. The entryway, are all of the offices enclosed? How does that work? Or is the one office actually open to that Welcome Center? I'm just curious. You've got the office by the 180 toilet all the way on the right side, and then you've got the 2, and you've got a break room, and then you've got an office, and then that office, it just has the 1 chair. Is that also enclosed?
Well, yeah, and remember that these are just an architect's rendition of what would be in each office. The offices would be accessed from the interior of the facilities. Likely there will be a table and chairs set up in the front area as well, so that if somebody wanted to have a sit down and a conversation, that could be facilitated. We're not showing every piece of furniture that might be included in this option.
Yeah, and then to add to that, add that answer, that's just sort of a mock-up, sort of a penciled drawing. We're still working through the process of what that interior will look like in order for it to best serve for rec and visitor center services.
Okay, great. That's what I was just wondering. And I do know that I actually talked to Julia in her job as recreation, and how important it was for her to have an enclosed office, because the type of work she does is very difficult if you're constantly distracted, sort of thing. So I was just kind of curious as to...
Yeah, right now they're all accessible only from once you get past the reception counter.
Okay.
Which we think is a good idea. We may add a door to that office that's in the, I'm just going to say north west, that is to the exterior. That last office on the left side.
One of the key things that we're looking for in order to help move the project forward from council today, if you're comfortable, is a thumbs up on the 3 restrooms being served for the public on the outside.
Right.
And then a facade in general, if you have a general idea, that would provide us with the flexibility to start to develop that RFP. The interior is something that we can work with to modify as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any comments then on our options as we go through? Brian?
I think the interior looks great. The redesign with the bathrooms on the back looks good, so I think we're all good, or I'm all good on the interior piece. I'm not particularly in love with any of the facades, so I guess I'll defer on that one. However, if you could pull up a picture of one of the facades, maybe just the number 4 that was recommended. So one of the things that we should maybe consider is on each side of the entrance, there's those bump out windows. And when you walk by and when you drive by, you know, you really can't see into the building, and those don't lend themselves to letting a lot of light into the building. So it might be worth looking at possibly putting full view roll up garage door on each side that would allow a lot more light in, so people could see inside from the outside, and that would also give us the opportunity to occasionally roll those doors up and have it be more of an inside outside venue for things like First Friday. You could have a musician in there and the music could come out and play onto the sidewalk. So that's my only input on the exterior. Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, I agree with Brian on the interior. I think the 3 bathrooms accessible from the outside is fantastic. It's going to be a really big improvement to what we have now, and it's going to be really good for the employees in there to not to have to be bathroom monitors, which is fantastic. As far as the exterior, just to be maybe a little more clear, I know these drawings came before Historic Building and Sites when I was on the commission for the first time. And I shouldn't say when I was on the commission, they came before these drawings. So number 4, the reason it was chosen, if I remember correctly, I don't want to make the final statement on behalf of the HBFC, but the reason it was chosen, of the materials that are being used in this one, it's really the only one that really could have been in that location, we'll say, when, you know, around the time that the rest of downtown was built. Like the rest of the materials in the other ones would not have been in our downtown. No how, no way. You won't see any examples of any of those materials in our downtown, which is why they, you know, were kind of just. So when it said that the Historic Building Sites preference was, it wasn't just aesthetic, it wasn't just a whim, it actually had some history in consideration there. As far as the ideas to potentially have, you know, roll-up doors and so forth, I think functionally that's really interesting and it's exciting, and we should probably consider that, but I would definitely bring the input of the Historic Buildings and Sites Commission into that discussion. But like I say, the reason 4 was chosen is because the other ones would never have been anywhere near our downtown, really. And so they were just kind of, you know, completely dismissed as being kind of irrelevant to our downtown discussion. I do, you know, like the idea of potentially having a semi-event place that Brian was mentioning, but I would definitely want to consult with Historic Buildings and Sites to see if they have any input on how if that could be done, how could it be done with historic flavor in mind.
Thank you, Rob. Rick?
Jason, if you want to go to the options, I would be in favor of option 2, I believe, or it's not numbered, or no, not the drawing, the choices of motions. Oh, sorry. So direction on the final plans, I liked the floor plan that's there, but I also I'm fine with concept 4, but I think it would actually be sort of neat to go back to the original design because to me, that brings back a historical value, and I think being totally white also, if somebody's looking for the Welcome Center, you could say, it's the white building down there. So that would be my preference. Thank you.
Kurt?
Just looking at them again, I think that option number 3 looks to me to be the most consistent with the other buildings on G Street. And so I guess I'm surprised that Historical Committee would say that about the design number 4 having the materials that were consistent. Was there any discussion about 3 at the committee meeting?
Yes, there was, and there were some strong feelings for the preferred, the one that came forward, and it was unanimous.
All right, well, as most of you know, I'm not a big fan of the Welcome Center, and so, but I am in favor of the bathroom situation, so there's got to be a building there, and I don't really care that much what it looks like, as long as there's bathrooms there, so
Okay.
that's my opinion.
Thank you. Valerie and then Rob?
Yeah, I personally, I mean, I do remember the conversation when they brought forward, and yes, having some brick was important because it tied it in with the downtown and the feeling of the brick. I personally am not wild about the original white. I mean, it is probably more trendy now than it was, but I think in terms of what I would like to continue to promote is the downtown feel, which goes along with the brick. So I feel like we've kicked this can down the road for about how many years now? I think Dave Reeves just shows how long ago it was since we first brought this up to have a Welcome Center complete. And even on this council, we weren't happy with 2 bathrooms, and so we went for 3, and I appreciate the staff, and coming back, it looks great. It has gone through the historical sites as it is. If we kick it back out, we're talking another down the road, and having seen this out and about for way too long as it is, I would give you the motion of have it as is, that 3 bathrooms and the number 4 preference, just so that we can move it along and have something happen there. I understand the part about opening it up and having something, is that is one thing that the that when we had the PAVE committee, they talked about, but I'm not quite so sure. I mean, if you go to that, like you said, the garage door style, that's a whole different measure to go through in front of the Historical Society. I think that not knowing exactly what's going to happen right now with the Caveman Plaza, I'm just happy to move forward with what we have.
Okay, so there's a motion then?
I'm always more than happy to make a motion to kick this can down the road. So I will provide direction to proceed with creating final plans and bidding documents reflecting presented floor plan and exterior concept number 4.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Second? Any discussion? Go ahead, Brian, and then Kurt.
I just have a question about Historical Buildings and Sites Commission's approval for this project. I mean, is this like a situation where we have to follow strict guidelines and you know, I'm not sure. I'm just trying to hear. I hear they're making recommendations, but you know, Valerie said with regards to like the roll-up doors that it would maybe, you know, create this big thing where it would have to, you know, go by them again because it may not, you know, preserve the historic feel. But I'm just not sure how beholden we are to keeping every aspect of the building historic. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Rob can weigh in on that.
Well, the committee has, the Historic Commission has made a recommendation that the authority resides with the council. So, Rob and then Kurt?
Yeah, no, the council is not in any way, shape, or form beholding to what any committee recommends. You know, the buck stops here, so to speak. What I will say is that in certainly in this particular case, and probably all cases, we'd be foolish not to listen to them on that area. That's their area of expertise. I can tell you that most people are pretty happy with the project that is on, was it 4th and J, the two new fourplexes. And I can tell you when those came into historic buildings and sites, the builder was happy with it, was ready to move forward, and he got 5 or 6 excellent recommendations, and he totally embraced all of them. He said that his project is much better because of it. He appreciated all of it. Some of it actually cost him some more money, but he appreciated all of it. He didn't necessarily have to listen to historic buildings and sites, but the building came out a lot better because he did. So for us not to, if any one of you have an area of expertise, whatever that might be, there are people on the Historic Building Sites Commission who have an area of expertise. And and that's kind of what they really are focused on. So whatever we decide on the outside, we'd be foolish not to at least get their input. And like I say, number 4, like in their mind, number 4 is dramatically different than some of these others for very specific reasons. And for some of us, we wouldn't even see those reasons, but for people who have an eye for historic, they do. So to have them look at it again is a smart move if we were going to do a different concept. You know, I have a little question about what the roll-up door open concept would be for the offices and things on the inside, and how much security and how much other stuff you'd have to worry about exposing all that stuff to the general public. But anyway, hopefully that answers your question, Brian.
Kurt, and then Vanessa?
Yeah, I should have mentioned in my comments before, you know, part of my questioning the Welcome Center is it's kind of a single mission thing, and I'm not necessarily convinced that it achieves its mission. But in support of the roll-up doors, you know, I think that would be reworking its mission. We could do a lot more things there, possibly sell tickets, sell swag, and make it more of a multi-purpose building and a multi-purpose mission. I do realize that the roll-up doors would probably cause some heartburn for the historical committee, but I just wanted to throw that support out there before we did anything.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. Vanessa?
I'm also not a huge fan of the greenhouse style windows. Perhaps a middle ground would just be having larger windows that aren't that greenhouse style as shown in some other drawings. I'm also in favor of the perpendicular signage on model number 8. I think that would be great for passerbys as well to help get their attention of the visitor center.
Okay, any more discussion about the motion on the floor? So it looks like we've pretty well exhausted it. Brian?
Well, I would just maybe ask, I'm not exactly sure how to go about this, but since this is a project that's going to take some time to actually get done, I feel like we have time to ask HBSC their opinion on the windows on the front. So I would maybe request an amendment to the motion to refer that particular piece to HBSC while staff is working on the other pieces. And I don't think that it would slow the project down to do that.
So we have a proposed amendment to the motion, and I need some help here really quick on
I would have to
procedures.
amend that. I would have to amend that, but I do have a question first. As to what he was brought up, whether it would delay things or from the perspective, I don't know where Jason, there you are. Whether that would cause a delay or it would be an easy thing to just have, you know, that particular part looked at moving forward. In terms of going out for an RFP, what are the plans?
There will be a little delay because if you give me clear direction that we're doing number 4 and moving forward, I can set the architect off to the engineers and they'll just start working. When we throw in the variability of possibly changing out the windows and roll-up doors, now we have to create more options. So it's adding a little bit of work. Yes, there will be a little bit of a delay, but it won't be significant, you know, another month or 2, because we have to get to the HBSC agenda and back, and then really set the engineers loose. They can work on some of the pieces, But, you know, we don't want them doing little segmented pieces. The engineering offices like to kind of just tackle everything. So yes, there will be a little delay. It won't be significant. We won't be constructing this probably till winter would probably be my guess. It's going to be out there a ways because by the time we get bidding documents, get it bid, award, you know, that takes 3 to 4 months and all of that process. So we're not this season anyway, so we have some time.
So Valerie, are you willing to amend your motion or not?
We'll amend it.
Okay, and so could you summarize for me before we vote what the amendment is?
I will make an attempt to provide direction to proceed with creating final plans and bidding documents reflecting the presented floor plan, exterior concept 4, with the agreement that the HBSC will look at the windows and look at other options at their next meeting and give a recommendation. Does that make sense? Yes.
Okay, and how do you vote, Valerie?
I will vote yes. Who's the
Vanessa?
second?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
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 I'll vote yes too. Okay,
Thank you very much. We'll get started. It's exciting, huh?
Yes.
next subject, Allenwood Development.
All right. So I'll be talking to you today about the Allenwood property characteristics with the potential to RFP for future development of more housing. So subject and summary, to provide City Council a property profile of the city-owned Allenwood properties and discuss potential options related to affordable housing. Relationship to Council's goals are to facilitate sustainable, manageable growth and to provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and community. Some background on this project here. The location consists of 3 parcels totaling 9.79 acres, and that's currently in the Allenwood Park Reserve. The 3 parcels were acquired from the Actuarial Pension Retirement Services Trust in January of 2005 for $1,040,000. These properties are currently zoned R18 and designated low density in the comprehensive plan. In 2010, the City Council adopted the Parks Master Plan, identifying the Allenwood piece as Park Reserve. So here we have some images. The one in blue is our largest piece from these 3 properties. And then we also have 1 and 2 labeled up top there. Those are the 3 parcels we're looking at today. As you can see, the zoning in the whole neighborhood is R18, and the little map up top shows some of the neighborhood characteristics, highlighting the schools in the area. Some more background for you. The 2019 performance audit, PAVE committee assessed 42 city-owned properties and did include the 3 Allenwood parcels on their list as recommended surplus properties and suggested retaining a portion of the main lot adjacent to Allen Creek for parks or open space. In February of this year, the Housing Advisory Committee recommended that the City Council rezone the 3 lots to R3 pending a traffic impact analysis and consider requiring the open space near the creek be kept open to the public in partnership with the future developer, and that the city complete the wetland delineation or reassessment and the type of housing development for this area to be reassessed after completion of the traffic impact analysis and wetland delineation, with the intent of seeking a mixed income development. So again, we're looking at these parcels. The little white boxes there have the slope numbers to them, just a slight slope. You can see some of the services. We do have a sewer gravity main going through the back end here. We have water coming along the Williams Highway, a few drainage lines going through, stormwater mains that come up to the properties here. And then here we have highlighted the conservation wetlands, conservation buffer. So quite a chunk. We've calculated maybe about 40% of that total area. So key property features, stormwater open ditches do run through sections of the property. Conservation wetlands and riparian setback take up a large portion of the western half of the property. Records do show a perennial stream crosses through the property, although looking at the aerials, it looks like that might be potentially delineated. Records show, a street frontage on Williams Highway, right-of-way extension off of Allenwood Drive. Potentially, we would not be able to go straight off of the Williams Highway. We would need to go through the Allenwood roads. These properties are zoned R18. To upzone them would take a comprehensive plan amendment and the traffic impact analysis. ODOT requires the stormwater detention and retention, and traffic impact analysis, as I said, and comprehensive plan amendment would be needed to upzone these properties. So I've done a couple mock-ups of potential units for different zonings. So the current zoning at R18 accounting for a 40% loss of space due to those wetland areas. We could potentially get about a max of 36.54 units if we leave it as is, and that's sticking with the 7,000 square foot minimum lot size. If we go up to an R2, still accounting for that 40% loss of space, we could bump up the potential units to around 73. That brings the minimum lot size for one dwelling unit down to 5,000. And up to that R32 that the HAC had recommended, still accounting for the 40% loss, could bump up to 117.48 units. And the square footage still stays the same for that minimum lot size. I have some examples of some higher density housing types. Development code does allow for cottage development of 5 to 12 units per lot under the current zoning of that lot. It requires a shared open space and other standards per section under that cottage development code. Under the upcoming middle housing code amendment, duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters will be allowed as a type 1A administrative decision under any residential zoning, including the current zoning. Multifamily unit developments, so 5+ units in a development, is permitted at R2 zoning and above. Visualizing some existing mixed income developments just to kind of get an idea of what these mixed income developments could look like. This example here shows along the edges of this neighborhood, we have our single family housing, and they're labeled here on the interior. There are some duplexes and triplexes peppered in there to kind of bring the density up without shocking the neighborhood system. A smaller example of that, we have our single family homes, and just on the corner here, we have one duplex just peppered in, just to add a little bit more density. Mixed income housing is one of two primary mechanisms to eliminate neighborhoods of concentrated poverty. It combats residential segregation and avoids the building of public housing that offers 100% of its housing units to those living in poverty. Mixed income communities can help decentralize that poverty and links the creation of affordable housing with private development, and it can be a powerful tool to combating displacement. If any of the units fall under affordable housing in a mixed income development, developers can apply to utilize affordable housing grants and funding proportionate to the amount of affordable housing produced. Some of our local ones, we have the Affordable Housing Grant, which covers system development charge waivers. We have the Housing Opportunity Fund, which goes into uses the construction excise tax, and we could utilize concessions on land purchase price. For affordable housing, just a brief reminder of some of the definitions. What qualifies as affordable housing can be different depending on the program and funding one is seeking to utilize. Most programs are going to cut off at the 80% area median income and below. Locally, we have two programs that do offer grants up to 100% of the area median income, which are the Affordable Housing Grant, which again is the system development charge waivers, and the Housing Opportunity Fund, which uses the construction excise tax. The numbers here are what that 80% cutoff is. This is the 2021 numbers. We just got the 2022 numbers out, so I didn't have time to put them in here, and they have bumped up quite a bit. But just to visualize what those income limits are per how many household members there are and what those rent cutoffs are for the bedroom sizes, just to get a bit of that visualization. Home ownership at 100% AMI for last year's numbers is a home that's purchasable at or below $228,000. And for 100% rent, which is pretty much average what we're seeing in our rental market now, a one-bedroom would be $1,221, a two-bedroom would be $1,465, three-bedroom would be $1,695. Some affordable housing types. Achieving a percentage of affordable housing could be achieved through various methods. Groupings of cottage clusters, townhomes, or duplexes built to be managed under regulated affordable housing programs. You can also engage with local Habitat for Humanity or other affordable housing home ownership programs. If we do want to set a requirement for percentage of affordable housing, which is not a requirement for mixed income, but if we wanted to, 10% of affordable housing, leaving it as R18, would be roughly 4 units in that neighborhood. If we asked 25, it would be about 9. If we bump it up to R2 and wanted 10% affordable housing, that would be about 7 units. And 25% under R2 would be about 18 units. At R32, 10% affordable housing for that neighborhood would be about 12 units, and 25% would be about 29 units. A few different approaches to development. The parcels are currently owned by the City of Grants Pass. The city could prepare a request for proposals for the development of affordable housing on 1, 2, or all 3 properties. The city could prepare a request for proposals for the development of mixed income housing on 1, 2, or all 3 properties. The city could prepare an RFP for both previous approaches as an acceptable option, so let the developer decide. The city could leave a portion or 100% of the properties in the Parks Reserve. Selling only a portion of the 8.6 acre parcel would require a land division or property line adjustment. Cost implications, there's no cost implications at this time, but what needs to be remembered is that the proceeds from the land purchase to the Parks Reserve does need to go back, so they need at least $1,040,000 of that original price to go back to the Parks Land Acquisition SDC Fund. And I just wanted to throw in that in our recommendations here, when we're talking about upzoning, staff in general is not in favor of going up to R3. It's a bit much for that neighborhood, especially with the middle housing amendment coming up, making much more things possible in the lower zonings. We would recommend lower than the R3 at the very least. Oop, I went too far.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good. Go ahead, Rob.
So, Amber, when you say that the staff doesn't favor R3 because you said it would be a bit much for that neighborhood, what specifically do you mean by that?
So I'll pull back up the neighborhood characteristics. So the whole area out here is R18, and jumping to R3 is quite a bit of a jump, and it would push us more into what spot zoning is, which is generally unfavored for city planning. We're also looking at the access ways for this piece, assuming that we will not be granted access onto Williams Highway. We would need to be going up through this Allenwood Road system here, which would need significant upgrades to handle that much of an increase in population and trips.
Vanessa and then Valerie.
Can you provide some insight on why the HAC had recommended to upzone to R3?
My understanding is that the push was more of giving the most possible development potential, and it was before the minimum density had passed, so that was not necessarily part of their consideration of how that could impact setting it at R3, as well as not necessarily keeping in mind the middle housing updates that were coming down that would make things more developable at the R18 and R2 level for the types of housings we're looking for.
Thank you.
Valerie, then Brian.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So the traffic impact study will have to happen no matter what, correct? So that's a given. How about with the zoning? It sounds like we can actually do a lot with R18 with the middle housing coming down. So
I would
that-
agree.
Yeah, so that's not really something we need to worry about, and that would save the cost. I don't know what the cost is for transportation impact study and what the cost is. I do know if you go through a zone change and the upzoning, that takes time,
It does.
which is money, and it takes staff time as well, which is also money. So it's my understanding that if we do any zoning change, we will have to go through the process. So, but if we leave it at R18, because of the changes coming down through the middle housing, we will be able to put cottages and other things on there, correct?
Right. The main difference that we see, other than the maximum density for dwelling units, is just the square footage difference here. For R18, we're going from 7,000 square feet for one dwelling unit down to 5,000. And the 2+ dwelling units goes from 7,000 to 3,500. So that is the biggest impact, really, is those two pieces.
So I just want clarification when this says minimum lot size for 2+. So in other words, if they put a duplex or a triplex on there, for each one of those, they have to allow the 3,500 square foot. So if
Correct.
it's a duplex, it would be 7,000 square foot.
Right.
Okay.
For R18, they would need 7,000 square feet for each unit. Whereas in R2, they would only need 3,500 per unit.
Okay. I also have a question, and I don't know if I'll plug in on this, on the property. You're saying that because part of what you're doing with a piece of property that's already city-owned is you're looking at saying that, in a sense, that's something you can give them or negotiate, is that land. So if you can negotiate that land, can you also not give it to them as part of the deal to bring down the cost of the housing, or how does that work? Or do we have to reimburse the fund and we have to reimburse
So we
that?
do
That's my
need to
question.
reimburse the purchase price of the parks.
The parks and the acquisition dollars that were utilized for that would have to be reimbursed. So after that, so let's say you take 60% of the $1 million, we'll just go $1 million. The $1 million would need to be paid back to the Park Reserve Fund. And then so council would then need to identify where the $1 million is coming from. And it would be general fund dollars, potentially ARPA dollars, depending on what percentage you're using for affordable housing, that kind of thing. But you'd need to come up with a revenue source to reimburse.
Okay.
Then once you come up with that revenue source, and just say it's general fund dollars, you've taken $1 million of general fund, you've given it to Parks. Parks is whole, that's fine. So now you've got $1 million where general fund owns this piece of property. It's up to council from a policy decision to determine if you want to incentivize, if any percentage or a certain percentage development. So at that point, if general fund owned the property, you could go ahead and just sell it as residential development. You could contract for residential development. You could incentivize affordable housing by reducing the price of the $1 million. And ultimately, let's say you say we're gonna reduce it by 50%. So we're gonna recognize, sort of like the Ramsey in a way, where we're accepting basically 50% cash and then 50% over a 20-year period or whatever. You can do the same thing. You could do a 50% forgiveness. The general fund will realize $500,000, and the other $500,000 went to incentivize affordable housing. There's so many possibilities.
Yes.
Once it goes in the general fund hands,
Okay.
you really are limited with options on what you want to do and what you deem appropriate for incentivizing housing.
But you will need to do the money back to the parks. I have another question for you on that one. Since we are looking at it and you look at the side, one of the things that I think was recommended by somebody that we keep part of it for the greenway and do a trail through there. Can you have them just keep that part in the parks? Is that a possibility? Since that is, if you really look at it, and I did take some time to look at the parks plan and realize and recognize that this is a trail opportunity to get back up to Allenwood. That's really, if you look at the parks plan, that's what people wanted. Green space, trails. That if you could keep part of that, but would that include, I mean, if we went for RFP and asked them to keep that, because obviously they can't build on it anyway, would that have to do the same thing and go through the whole process?
So, yeah, there's going to be certain portions of that because of wetlands or conservation areas that will not be buildable. But you can utilize that portion to potentially be part of the trail access or some kind of future park reserve or something like that. Doesn't mean you can't take the full 9 acres and say 50% of it's housing, 50% of it's still parks. You can do, there's so many variations you have available to you.
Okay, so that is an option if we decided to keep the 40% or whatever that is indeed unbuildable and have it remain as an open space, green space, and keep it in the parks. That is a possibility.
Yeah, definitely, because that development may need to utilize some of that also for stormwater detention or collection and then also easement for trail access. So yes, you can do something like that.
Thank you.
Rick, did you have a comment?
Oh, I was next, and
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was actually just going to have, let Amber finish the presentation before we continue.
That sounds good.
I just had my call to action slide. So our options are to provide direction to initiate residential development of Allenwood, RFP with potential rezone and traffic impact analysis, to analyze and/or survey the neighborhood for input, research future parkland demand based on anticipated growth in this sub-area, move to additional workshop for discussion, and provide direction to maintain as future park reserve.
Thank you, Brian. Rick?
Thank you, Amber. So can you explain, you said this middle housing directive is coming down. What type of density would it allow under the R18?
So R18, again, I'll pull up the kind of key features here. So R18 with the middle housing amendment, you can do, obviously you can do the single family homes, you can do duplexes, triplexes, cottage clusters, townhomes, really most of what they would consider middle housing other than your general multifamily apartment buildings or the long row homes. So it really is pretty inclusive in what could be included.
So when you go back to the slide under the R18, showing only 36 potential units, could you say that could double or triple?
You won't be able to up that amount. That amount would be the maximum maximum units per acre. So that is unless the wetlands are delineated and we get more space out of those, it's purely going off of the acreage.
So if the developer were to utilize ADUs, could you double that if they did an ADU on each lot?
I think the ADU still counts as a unit, so we would still need to fit that maximum density
I don't
piece.
think so.
So an ADU, I think would increase that maximum if an ADU is something that was going to be built out. I think the ADU it's not necessarily included as the baseline for this number.
Okay.
So you could potentially increase that density number a little bit if you were to plan for those also. But ADUs don't necessarily have to be affordable housing. They just are housing. They could be housing inventory.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Going from questions to discussion? We've had some discussion. Brian, and then Valerie?
So we're in discussion? Okay. So I agree that R3 is probably too dense for that particular location. As much as I want to do everything we can to solve the housing crisis, I think that R3 is a little too far there. I think we should certainly look at R2 and the traffic impact analysis of what R2 would be for those properties. And then it's hard for me to go much beyond that until I see what the traffic impact analysis would be, but assuming it's favorable, I think that's probably the direction I would like to go, just to get more density out of that area, but not necessarily maximum density.
Thank you, Brian. Valerie?
Yeah, I agree. I would not go R3 in that particular neighborhood. I do know we will have to do the traffic impact analysis. I don't know what the cost is or how much, I personally think that you could keep it R18 and get more density out of it. I think and I still believe really strongly, since you can't build on 40% of it right there, that, that part needs to be somehow used as greenway and green open space. I'm torn. Like I said, I just don't know how much cost is involved in going out and doing the upzoning. So maybe I'll ask that of Jason or our staff. Do we have any idea? How long is that process? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't think that. I would think 10,000 for a TIA of this size, because you're talking about a lot of houses, and it's going to need a couple different analyses with traffic leaving via Allenwood Drive, potentially coordinating with ODOT to see if a 238 outlet would be allowed. I strongly suspect it will not.
Yeah, that would be my assessment as well.
Because of its proximity to Allenwood. So in that 10 plus range for the TIA, I can't speak to the rezoning. I'm sure that's a couple month process through the planning process. But you have to have the TIA in advance and then file the planning application. So, you're probably 3, 4, 5 months total for all of that.
So when they do the traffic impact study, do they go out to the neighborhood and talk to the neighbors in terms of getting an idea what the neighbors' thoughts are? No? Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Riker. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Probably not. It
Okay.
really is strictly about how many cars and how are they going to get to and from their houses.
Yeah, and I will just say, as Rick would say in Green, knowing transportation, that it is not going to be able to come off of 238. It will not. It will need to go through that neighborhood. So I personally, I would rather keep it R18 and go with what we have and just try to get the maximum density on that.
So what I'm hearing is, and don't hesitate to disagree with me, I'm just trying to expedite the process here. What I hear in terms of alternatives is that the council wants to provide direction to initiate residential development of Allenwood. I didn't see anybody disagree with that in terms of what we would give to the staff to prepare for us. I saw some discussion on the zoning in that presentation between R2 and what Valerie just said, that, that we can discuss. The funding and the costs would also probably be part of that, along with what would be affordable housing versus workforce housing in that presentation. Does that make sense? If they come back to us and you want to do that at a workshop so we can make a decision?
My question is, do you have
Rick
to know?
and then Brian, and then we'll go to Valerie. Sorry, Valerie.
Oh, no, that's okay.
This is a very complex subject, and being on the PAVE committee, looking at that, making it available for affordable housing, I'm fully behind that. I would like to see more density. At a minimum, this is just my perception. At a minimum, I would like to see at least R2 in there. And one way of maybe achieving a compromise of having R2 would be take 50 or say 30% of the property is R2 and 30% is R1 and the rest of it's the open area. But in any way this would be approached, it's going to be a very lengthy process. I could envision with all the traffic issues and so forth, and if you're going through a zone change, it'd be a minimum of 2 years. I'm just throwing figures out there. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to, again, it's just my impression, the traffic analysis will be extremely difficult if you only have one access. And I'm not sure when it comes to our code, whether we can have one access in and out for this level of development. I think we're going to have to develop a secondary access as well in the process, and there's various ways of doing that, but it will be an additional challenge. And the other thing I do like, I like mixing up the housing types, whether they're single family or townhouses or clusters and so forth. I think that would be a real advantage. And then again, as I said, at least a certain portion of that be relate to income levels. Aaron, you had?
Well, I think you really hit the nail on the head and drove it down to into the 2x4 there on that, because it is, there's two paths. One thing that we've got clear, I think, today is that council as a whole 100% supportive of this being housing. That's a big win. The other one that I think we're discussing now, that you're discussing now, is R18 versus R2 versus R3 type of thing, and you were really going to explain it. You may be able to rezone to R2, but the traffic impact analysis might come back saying you really can't fully develop to R2 because the way the system is currently designed, it's designed for R18. And so your access to the highway, et cetera, is designed for R18 development, unless you were to get additional accesses, maybe additional property, et cetera. So one path definitely is less complex with less potential conflict points than the other. And so council, I think, just has to weigh the pros and cons of those two decisions on moving forward as it being R18 versus R2, and what the ultimate end goal is for you as a whole.
And being on the PAVE committee, when we looked at this property, I want to say that we did have a couple of neighbors come in and said they would love to have the park there. They did not want increased traffic on their road. And I can see, just because of the different approval processes that are involved, this could be stretched out for a long time unless you're able to get the neighborhood on board. And Amber, can you go back to one of the first slides that shows the parcels? Okay, so there's, below the number 3 is another very large parcel. And I think when we look at this parcel, it would be advantageous to approach that owner and see if they could be part of the long-range planning, especially if we're able to extend a road now or in the future to the south. And I think to include them as part of the review process now would be to our advantage.
That's part of what the TIA would also do when you're looking at development in acreage type of properties and continuation of road access and property access. That design is considered often in subdivisions, so you know and that's why you have those plugs. You call them street plugs, because the subdivision was designed and then stopped at the property line, but the road's there, and we put technically a plug there that you have to sometimes officially unplug through an ordinance. And so that's because we've designed for future connection to another larger tract of property and that road to continue through there.
And the biggest obstacle I've seen over time, the owners that live there don't want to open up the street plug, so that can become yes, legally it's there, but also presents additional, trying to get the people on board to support the project can be a challenge.
Yeah, and the neighboring property, and again, that's the future, but you mentioned the piece just directly south of there. If that was in even the game plan of something to partner, that could drastically change the concept of road access and ability to fully utilize the R2 versus R18. And so that is a totally different piece that would, I think, make potentially you have a different decision, because it totally puts different characteristics into your decision-making process.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
So I have actually been in contact with that property owner, and he has expressed some interest in participating in this process. So just to keep that in mind as well, very open to it.
So what I hear is that we have it as a future topic with some additional information. And at that meeting, it's a business meeting, we will have determine the zoning. Based on information, hopefully we have, or at least good options, and the council can give direction then at that time. And also on the affordable housing versus the workforce housing percentage, and also on methods and funding. Does that make sense?
It does. I'd like to maybe add one more thing, if council so desires, is maybe some direction, and we don't want to be out in front of council on this, but if council does want us to further explore the property owner's desire to the south and a potential partnership for development, that could change the whole development guidelines and your decision-making and how we would actually play that out. And so that could be informative also. So if you would give us a couple of weeks, if you wanted us to explore that potential partnership in developing that area, then that might be advantageous for you.
Oh, well, and I don't want to speak for the council, but I'll just throw it out there. I think that's a good idea, and that's what the council would support. Did I hear any? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Brian?
So is this going to come back at another workshop or at a business meeting? You said business meeting.
I did, and I did that intentionally. Maybe that's not going to be ripe enough for a decision.
I feel like there's a lot of variables out there and it's going to probably need another workshop.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
I think at this point, a workshop's probably best, because then we can give you what we know as the parameters of what you might be looking at. And I think one more meeting would be enough to potentially put us into a business meeting.
And I think it's going to be difficult, at least for me, to make a decision without having the traffic impact study completed. So I don't know how long that takes, but we might need to wait until that's done to have that workshop.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay, anything else before we move on?
I just want clarity on that, and that's
Okay.
just it. Because what I hear you say is that we want to talk with the developer who owns the property. I've talked to him as well, and I do know that that is an opportunity, and that we need, once we get that discussion going, then we would go out for the traffic impact study. Am I correct? Because that is what will make the difference, all the difference in the world. Because you're right, I forgot, and I thank you, Rick, for bringing up the fact that you do have to have 2 access points. That's a safety feature. So that will need to happen. So that would, whether we're going to partner or not, will make a huge difference. So the first step is reaching out to the person and coming back with that information, and then making a decision on traffic impact then, or that's the clarification, is when will we do the traffic impact?
Correct. It'd be most efficient if we waited to see what type of partnership we may be able to form with regards to a larger scale residential development in there. That'll have an important part in what your TIA would look like.
Okay, thank you. So I just want a clarification that has to come back first before we rush off. Well, thank you.
Good job by all. Thank you. Okay, we're on to our, thank you very much. Do you feel like you have appropriate response from us in terms of direction?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our last topic is agenda review, and I even brought my glasses. That's amazing. So we got budget meetings coming up. Our meeting Wednesday night, we have the resolution allocating ARPA funds. It's going to have some discussion. We got the purchase of a lot on Allen Creek Road, banking authorizations, the Spalding Park Action Plan. We have to appoint some Sustainability and Energy Action Task Force members, and Ordinance Housing Needs Analysis Middle Housing Code Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Then on next Monday, we have the Transportation System Plan Review. Then we got budget meetings. So that's on May 12th, or 10th and 12th, and then we have a workshop for candidates for the Historical Commission and agenda review. So through May 16th, is there any comment or thoughts? Brian?
I just have a question on May 16th. It has the ARPA discussion, and this This topic may tie into that, so it may not need to be a separate topic, but the idea of discussing a density bonus program with some of the affordable housing funds and the ARPA funds that we have, I don't know if that could, if that would be appropriate to be part of that discussion, or if that needs to be its own agenda item.
So you're talking about on May 4th, not May 16th, correct? Were you
I was
what-
talking about May 16th.
May 16th? Oh, as a potential one after we allocate the ARPA funds?
Yeah, so that would come later.
Okay, and then, and what was the proposal again?
A density bonus program,
A density bonus program. So if you developed it to the
incentivizing
maximum
people
density.
to build to
Sure.
a certain density.
Okay.
Is that part of, I guess my question kind of goes back to what you were saying, Brian. What is the role of that discussion? Is it to talk about how we're going to use those affordable housing? Because that kind of ties in with that. Is that what the discussion is for?
Yeah, so the council president can chime in on this also, but during the meeting with the council president and the mayor, both of them were discussing the follow-up to the business meeting on May 4th, when you would be adopting a resolution sort of identifying the major categories. Well, that identifies the major categories, but within the major categories, there's a number of objectives and tasks associated with those items that we'll need to flush out so we can be more specific with regards to how that money's going to be spent or what staff needs to work on. So the mayor and council president thought it would be good to have on there a couple placeholders for further defining the major categories that you've adopted in your resolution.
So what our city manager was saying that after we authorize allocating the ARPA funds, not only are we going to need additional meetings on housing, but probably on all of them from an implementation standpoint, and exactly how do we implement those spending of those ARPA dollars. So we can sure look at that on the 16th. We need to consult with the mayor and see where we're going on that. And we're trying to be respectful of your time, but also implement things in a timely manner. And what we can expect moving forward then is there'll be some other ARPA topics for implementation, probably all of them. Because it's been my experience that you can decide that you want to spend money on something, but that it needs more than that to actually do it in an efficient and timely manner. So thank you, Brian. Any other changes? Okay, going beyond that, May 18th, we have the ordinance, mental housing code, rest home park, playground equipment, pre-treatment code update, funds to RV cruisers, resolution on the water system, several of those, Hunter communication contract renewal, master agreement, stormwater consultant, meadow wood reservoir design, housing code amendment findings of fact from one of our committees. We need to appoint several committee members. Agenda review, then on May 31st, we have the workshop canceled. Anything associated with that people want to see different at this point in time? The other thing is if you think of something coming up, you can always text us or let us know for our agenda setting meetings. This is not a do or die situation here. Okay, moving forward, June 1st, we got the resolution replacement water treatment plant phase, findings of fact for middle housing code, appoint another committee member. And then for June 6th and June 13th and June 15th and June 20th, it's open at this point in time. We'll probably have several ARPA discussions there for implementation. We still have to put on there the topic of pay for city councilors, future city councilors, not present, in time to be on the ballot this November. So that's still on our mind, Rob. I want you to know we haven't forgot that. Any other thoughts? I'm doing a lot of talking. Brian?
Well, if there was nothing else, I was just going to move to adjourn.
Okay. And a second? Second by Rick. Aaron?
I just had one quick announcement. You may see a new face in the room, JC. Here, our new
JC.
finance director. First day is today. He'll be with us all week, so you'll be seeing more of him. And please take an opportunity to say hello.
Hello, JC. Thank you for coming. Hopefully you find a good place to live. Okay, with that, does anybody object to leaving? Okay, we're adjourned.